Discussions in this show are for entertainment and educational purposes only and should not be construed as specific recommendations or investment advice. Always consult with your investment professional before making important investment decisions. Securities offered through registered representatives of Cambridge Investment Research Incorporated, a broker-dealer, member FINRA, SIPC. Advisory services through Cambridge Investment Research Advisors Incorporated, a registered investment advisor. Cambridge and SmartPro Financial are not affiliated.
All right, we're here with Rachel Cruze. Welcome to SmartPro Radio. We're so excited to have you share the wisdom and your knowledge and your experience with our listeners. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Well, I really want to start with the two books that are right over your shoulders, and it's the two new children's books that you have. And I love these books. Actually, it's something that I was reading. I read both of them. We have them at home. We have two kids. We have a 3 and a 5-year-old, two boys. And so it's something that works in our house for sure. But where did this idea come from to do children's books?
You know, it really came from my own experience. I have 3 little ones at home, 9, 7, and 4. And one day, this was last year, my middle, she asked, so Mom, when is the Amazon guy coming today? And I thought, oh gosh, I've like created this monster because I'm a spender at heart.
Yeah.
That is that is part of my money personality for sure. But I realized, gosh, so much of the battles I have dealt with money really had to do with contentment. I mean, I can be one of those people that I can just, I see something and I can justify it in my head that it's quote unquote in the budget and it doesn't cost a lot, all the justifications to kind of get that hit of like, oh, that's exciting. That's a fun, new shirt or jewelry or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I realized how much my kids were watching that. And I've just known walking through being intentional with money, for, my adult life, that I know this stuff and I know that money does not create a level of sustainable joy. It doesn't.
Yeah.
And it can create a great life and you can, have some conveniences. But at the end of the day, if that is why you are spending money, you're going to be a rat in a wheel for the rest of your life. And I know that because I've experienced that. And so I wanted my kids to have a message to some degree around that contentment. And then as I started thinking about it, there were these other emotional based principles around money, contentment, gratitude, generosity. And so I thought if I can put this in a way that my kids can understand it and hear it, I would love to do that. And so naturally the children's book is kind of what it came out of that. And I wanted animals. I didn't want kids because I wanted it to be a little bit more whimsical and fun. Yeah. And so the process of it was really, really fun. I mean, I loved doing that project. It was so great. So it turned out wonderfully and hopefully, families that bought it are loving it too.
I imagine they are. And the interesting thing is if I look on Amazon that has the age range of it says, 3 to 6, and it's like, no. That's not, goes beyond that. And good children's literature can speak to an adult. And so I'm reading this book and I'm reading, I'm glad for where I am. And I'm sitting here going, daggers, like, oh man, because I have a lot of the tendencies of this book and what it's trying to explain. It's funny is we bought our house in 2020 and I remember buying it and I was like, I'm so thankful we bought this house. Like, this is great. And then, a year or two, you're like, we need to redo this and add this. And have you seen these other ones? And all of a sudden it starts wearing off to where the joke is now with my wife. She's like, you're not allowed into a model home, because I immediately go home and I'm like, we need to move. Right. And all of a sudden you're like, I don't have that same, gratitude, and it's always looking for the next thing. And so that's the issues that I have personally. And reading that book, I was like, oh, that speaks to the adult in me.
Yes. Well, and that was part of my goal too, because some of my favorite kids' books, and as a parent of little ones, this, you read so many, right? And there's like Chicka Chicka Boom Boom and, all the things and it's great, right? Like some of these are great stories. But the ones that get me and the ones I selfishly love to read is exactly that. It's a message at the end of the book that I'm like, I just needed to hear that. So that was part of the motivation in the storyline is I was like, I want the parent or the grandparent, the babysitter, whoever's reading this to be like, oh, I needed to hear that too. So I appreciate that call out because that was part of the goal of it too.
No, and it's true. It's right. I firmly believe that, going over it, they both books speak in that way. So it's great. And I've realized that too with my children, because I'm the same. I'm the natural spender and I'm the one who's like, yeah, that'll be fun. Let's do it. And so I'm part of the problem too. So it's good.
Totally. Absolutely. I know.
So going into, a lot of what you talk about, I think there's this idea of contentment around it, right? Gratitude, happiness for what you have. A lot of your books, a lot of the work that you've done has been kind of had this thread throughout what you do, and even how you end your podcast. You talk about, creating a life that you love. Like, how can you do that if you don't have contentment and happiness for where you're at?
Yeah, I think it's really difficult. And I think we are given a message consciously and subconsciously in our world, whether it's through, social media, even conversations with friends, experiences that we have, that there still is always going to be that belief somewhere in us, even though we know it's not correct, that, oh, if I could just have that,
Yeah.
then I'm going to be okay. Or if I can just get this or just experience that or go on that trip or have this kind of house or car, then it's going to fix me for some reason, right? And so
Sure.
that's the messages that are, all around us.
Yeah.
And so that's why contentment, I really do believe, is one of the most powerful financial principles. And I think I think it's a practice to do on a daily basis. And there's almost this conscious reminder that you may have to remind yourself, because something's going to pop up on your phone and suddenly you're like, oh, okay. And you kind of get, sidetracked from it. And so that contentment principle, I think it's at the heart of winning with money, because at the end of the day, we teach financial peace. And I've even gotten recently, and again, I may disagree with this in a year from now, so I'll say that with the caveat, but I've even gotten to the point that I'm like, I don't even want to have a number goal anymore. Like,
Mhm.
oh, I want to have $1 million by X
Sure.
age, or like, because there's a part of me that I'm like, you can get there. And if contentment or your character has not been fluidly worked on throughout that process, okay, you're just you with $1 million, and then that's gonna make you more of who you are, and if you're
Sure.
discontent, it's gonna make you more discontent to keep
Sure.
chasing and chasing and chasing. So,
Yeah.
there's something about that financial peace message, that piece is gonna look different for people, but that's what I want people to understand, is that that's the goal. It's
Yeah.
the goal to say, "Hey, not living paycheck to paycheck, having savings in the bank, saving up for the future, not owing anyone anything." Like, there's these elements, these financial principles that I think can get you closer to a level of,
Yeah.
"Okay, I can find a level of peace and sleep at night," which that when you start to feel that peace, you're thinking, I want more. I think investing time and money into things that you can't buy. That's your relationships and your family, your health, I mean, your spiritual life. Like, there's these elements that you can't buy. So how can you enhance those in your life? Right. So it's kind of a journey for me. But those are the reminders that I have and that are healthy for me.
It's interesting that you talk about a number and a financial number. So uh, our office is all financial professionals, and I agree with you because
Well, I said that with like the caveat. I was like, oh, I don't know.
no,
He's gonna
yeah,
agree or
no,
not.
no. And the reason is because go the opposite direction. So if anyone is looking at a number of success when it comes to income, those goalposts continually move, right? I make
Yes,
85.
right.
If I just made 100, I would be happy. And then you get there and you're like, that didn't work. Now it needs
Yep.
to be
I want
125.
150. Yeah, that's right. That's
And
right.
so it's always moving. The goalposts always move. And the same will happen with the dollar amount in retirement or in an account you're trying to build up, right? When I want 1 million by 40, and then, well, by 45 now I need to, and it just always is changing. It's always a
Yes,
chase.
that's
And
right.
that chase
Exactly.
it never tends to work out well,
That's
because it's
exactly
not coming
right.
from the right spot, And
Yeah, and
so
it's that belief that I'm gonna be okay when I get that. And
yes,
that's true with, or that's not true with a number in your account or the car you drive. You can plug in any item or amount,
absolutely.
and at the end of the day, it is what it is.
Yes. And the other thing that um, you know, going back to what talking about numbers, and this is behavioral, right? So you guys talk all the time at Ramsey Solutions about, hey, it's 80% behavioral, 20% head knowledge. And this lives squarely in that 80% category. Because if you don't have this under control, man, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Yes, it's interesting, social media is always a fun place to throw, ideas or content out there,
Yep.
and you can see which ones hit and which ones don't. And the two pieces of content that I always put out that I get the most pushback on, one is when I tell married couples to combine their accounts.
Sure.
I get the most hate from that. And then the second is when I say it's not an income problem, it's a behavior problem.
Mm-hmm.
And you think, oh, if I just, to your point earlier, if I just made $100,000, I wouldn't have these problems. But the issue is it's you going with you, and your problems just get magnified the more money that you have. And man, people, I mean, they came out of the woodworks. And I'm like, sure. Now, if you had good money tendencies and you made more money, Is that going to help you? Yeah, sure. It's going to magnify the good when you're working towards something good, for sure. But it's a humble pill to swallow, to look in the mirror and say, okay, sure, if I had more money, could some of this be easier? Maybe, but at the end of the day, I'm the one choosing what I'm spending my money on. I'm the one making these decisions. I'm the one with the expectations of lifestyle that it should be here. And if
Mhm.
it's not here, I'll find a way to fill in the gaps, even with debt. Like, I mean, that's a mindset shift that you have to have, and that's when things radically start to change.
That's right. Yeah, I've been reading a lot of books about habits. A lot of Craig Rochelle has a few out, and I'm wondering, is this idea of gratitude and being happy for what you have and it being so foundational important? Can this be a habit? Can you build this muscle over time? And
I
how do
think
you do it?
I think so. I think that there's a conscious level that you have to have with habits, right? And I think it's Atomic Habits. He talks about how you almost flip to your identity, that I am a
Right.
person who is grateful, right? I'm not going to just have, oh, I'm going to create a habit of gratitude. I'm going to be a person that's grateful. And there's something powerful about when you become something that you want to be. And that takes work. It takes practice.
Yeah.
But then over time, it does start to be who you are. And I think that it's such an important part of all of this, because we can get so in the grind. And I think even season of life, right? Where you guys
Sure.
are as a family and us. And it's like, I mean, you're just surviving the day: dinner, dishes, bath time,
Yes.
bedtime, get in bed, lay down. We say hi to each other as spouses, and then, wake up and do it all again. I mean,
Yeah.
it is the grind. And when you're in that cycle of survival, the thought of reaching out of other things of myself seem almost impossible.
Yeah.
But when you really make it a part of who you are and you do it even in the grind, I think it does build something in you that is beautiful, and it becomes a part of who you are. So I love that identity shift. I think
Yeah.
that's really powerful.
I think so too. And I think part of, what I see, especially where I live, I'm down here in Sarasota, Florida. It's a
Yeah.
wealthy part of the country. And you see wealth everywhere and it's on display everywhere. And so, accumulation and buying things and what do you have becomes this measuring stick of success that everyone seems to be chasing. Like, why do you think that is? Like, why do we get caught up in that? Because almost it's even for me, I can get caught up and I know better.
Sure. Right. Oh, I know. I know. I think there's a level of it that we're still at. We ask the question in ourselves, like, am I enough? Am I good? And if I have a level of a badge that I can wear, whether it's the car or the name brand purse, like, if I have this badge that society says, oh, you're amazing,
Yeah.
that's somehow going to make me feel like, okay, I'm good. I'm on track. I'm good. I'm keeping up with everyone. And when you're submersed in a culture and in your lifestyle that is everywhere, I think it is harder, because the expectation, or the median is
Mhm.
is pretty high of what is expected. And so yeah, there's something in that I think it's human nature too. I think there's a level of comparison that is really innate in us and how we're wired, to see where we are going with the pack, right? You're kind of looking around
Right.
to see. But it's when those motivations start to change and you start to think, okay, now I need that to feel okay with myself, or I need that for other people to see me in this light, is where it really starts to buckle, I think. And
Yeah.
and the problem is, people live in that their whole lives.
Yeah.
And it's exhausting. I mean, there's a point that it is exhausting. And so to free yourself from it, it takes, I think, a level of, for sure, security. And I don't know, there's kind of a beauty, and I've found this even with myself, of, not that you're giving the middle finger to to society, but there's a part of me that I'm like, I love shopping at Target and telling people,
Yeah.
yeah, I got this from Amazon. And it, like, I don't know, maybe it's the opposite side of pride.
Yeah.
that I feel that. But yeah, I think it's a very normal feeling, but also when you're stuck in it for so long, it's exhausting.
Yeah. And I agree with that. And I'm one of those people that I have to take myself out of those situations. Like I have to actually do the work. So things like I'm probably not going to be on social media very often because that's
Right?
going to influence me greatly. And I joke that I am like the ideal candidate for the targeted ad. I'm like
Yeah.
the person that's like, yes, give me the targeted ad. And I will then
Yes.
follow through with it. So I just like, I got to be out of that world. But then all of a sudden, you know, I started looking around. I'm like, when did everyone start getting Escalades and Range Rovers? Where like, what
I
happened
know.
here? And all of a sudden, that Chevy Tahoe that I was so proud of back in the day looks not so good. And people do that
Yes.
all the
Yes.
time.
Oh,
You
for
know?
sure. And what's interesting, and being in your industry, but we see the stats coming out, right? Where some of those people, I'm sure, have the money to pay for it, right? I mean, there are wealthy people in our country, 100%. But there's also a whole lot of people that are just, I mean, they are doing what they can to continue that facade.
That's
And,
right.
you know, the avenue of debt creates that.
Yeah.
And that's what's hard is like where that norm baseline is so high today. It's so high in Sarasota, Florida, and I think in
Yeah.
Kansas City. Like, right, you go anywhere in the country in this picture because we see people's lives constantly on display because of social media and other things. And I think that's what makes it so hard to combat is you start to believe, oh, this is the norm. And if I'm not there, somehow my net worth and my self-worth are all tied up together. And we got to separate those two.
Yeah, I agree. So then moving on to children, how do you instill this in kids?
My number one piece of advice, and I think it's true, I think for any other part of life, but especially money, is more is caught than taught. I mean, and I really believe that. I think our kids are watching us. And more than ever, now that I have a 9-year-old and she's very intelligent, but she will parrot back things or ask questions in such a way that I'm like, oh, crap. She's watching and listening so much more than you realize. And they're
Yeah.
internalizing it. And I've just realized what we set in our home, our baseline, my husband and I talk about this all the time. And again, this is from a spiritual aspect. This is from a health aspect. I mean, anything that what we do as parents, our kids are assuming is the right way.
That's right.
Like, oh, that's how you're supposed to do life. And so what are we painting for them? What examples are we setting that this is how you're supposed to treat the waiter at the restaurant? This is how, you know, this is everything in life. And they're looking to us, especially at younger kids, before they start questioning us as parents, but like they're just the belief is, oh yeah, how mom and dad do it is the right way. And so for me, it's really convicting. And so as we're talking about the Amazon guy that shows up, you know, every day at our house because we're ordering something, to whatever it may be, I tell my kids and we talk about it and I try to live it out of, hey, if all of this hits the fan, we're going to be okay.
Yeah.
If we have to move to a 2-bedroom apartment, we're going to be on top of each other, but our family is intact. Like the health of our family and the connection with our kids is everything. And I hope they feel that priority over any, you know, vacation we take or home that we live in. And so the way we set up our family and what we value, my husband and I, our kids are going to assume that's what we need to value too.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think, you know, for me, I had to, you know, with my oldest son, not learn that the hard way. It was more so going, man, I'm part of this problem as the parent. And, you know, I didn't grow up in a, you know, a lot of people say they grew up with nothing, so they want to give their kid everything. I didn't have that situation growing up. I didn't feel I ever had any need. So it didn't come from that place. It just came from this place of, oh, I like seeing his reaction when I give him something, you know, it's a toy or whatever. And so it's kind of that enabling side of it. And where I saw this shift, my Amazon package, like you explained earlier with your daughter, was going to the grocery store and going in the Hot Wheel aisle, and it's going, can I have a Hot Wheel? Yeah, of course. It's $1.50. It's no, yeah, this isn't going to change anyone's world, but it's going to change his. He loves it. You get a Hot Wheel. Do it the next time. Do it the next time. And it becomes this habit, which is fine, except for all of a sudden I bring home the grocery bags and put them on the island, and he runs to them. He's not at the store with me now. He's running to them. Instead of saying, Daddy, can I have a Hot Wheel? He says, where's my Hot Wheel? And I went, oh, there was a shift here in language, but it meant everything, right? This expectation had been set that I'm always going to get. And my wife said, okay. And she got your original, one of your original books, The Smart Money, Smart Kids. And we're going to change this up. We're going to change this up a little bit. So we started doing commissions, right? Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
And we're going to get commissions. And we went to the store, and he's got his bag of, you know, quarters, and he puts out, and the person at the front goes, I haven't seen a kid do this in like 10 years, you know, but it was just that change of, okay. And he's like, I can only get one. Yeah, dude, you can only get one. That's it. But it changed the mindset. And so,
for sure,
you know, I think that going back to the ideas that you have in that book are helpful as well, because they're timeless, right? They still work.
Yes.
And it goes into too, how some of your experience. So when the way you were raised in the Ramsey household, what did you learn early on when it came to money?
You know, that, I mean, when you said it, it was so true. The commission system, that money comes from work. And I was raised in a household. I mean, I was born the year my parents filed for bankruptcy. So I mean, they really didn't start doing quote unquote really well with money until I was probably 8th grade, 9th grade. And even by then they weren't like dishing it out. Like we didn't
Yeah.
really see it. And so my childhood, I mean, it was things that I look at, and Winston and I, my husband and I, we talk about this too, because the difference now with our kids, to your point, a little bit of, where do we fall in line as parents, is that we pay for conveniences. Winston and I now are at the stage where like we will get the yard done from a yard guy. We will get groceries delivered if we need to. Like we will pay for things to make our life easier. And now we're realizing our kids are not growing up in a house where they're seeing their dad mow the lawn.
Yeah.
And Winston kept his lawnmower for years and then just sold it when we moved into our new house in 2018. And so that's a conversation now of like, okay, we don't want to do so much for our kids, but yet we're having so much done for us to a degree as adults.
Yeah.
And where does the inconveniences of life play in to help our kids see? And Winston and I both grew up with hardworking families who, I mean, they did fine, but it wasn't like, oh my gosh, it was like this glamorous life. And there's something, a beauty in that, a grounding in that I want my kids to experience. And so I think part of it though is bringing them in to have responsibility around the house. And I saw this clip on Instagram, so God help us all if it's even true or if this person's legit. But he was talking about if a kid grows up in a wealthy family or a well-to-do family, the worst thing you can do for them is do too much.
Yeah.
And I heard that. I think that's so true. I mean, we grew up working yard work, cleaning porch. I mean, we did stuff all the time as kids. And so I think that was a beautiful part of my foundation as a child, because it gives you this dignity that I am capable of doing things from a young age. And so that is something that we haven't been as great about. We do some of the chores stuff, but there's some child labor in there that I'm like, they need to learn how to clean the bathtub and clean, understand like this is what it takes to clean a home and to do the yard work. So it's an interesting shift that happens. And but I think that work part, that piece, I think is just really key because it's good for the kid. It's good. It was good for me, but also from a tactical standpoint, you earn money when you do that. And then you get to experience giving that money and saving that money and spending that money that is yours, that you earned. And so it just changes the emotions around money as well.
Yeah, I agree. So when you kind of think maybe it's not now, but maybe it's 5 years down the road, when you're having to communicate with your kids in a way of, hey, we have wealth. As I think of so many people that have grown into wealth, that have built something, or they came from a family or generations of it. And you hear it's almost like there's almost like only two ways. Either it tends to be people's mind says, well, they're not going to get anything, right? I'm not going to give my kids anything. They're going to earn everything. Like, oh man, that sounds kind of rough, right? Like,
right.
And then the other side of it is that idea of a trust fund kid that is not grounded in any reality at all. And so it seems like that's the way society says there's two ways, but obviously we know that's not necessarily true, and that wealth isn't bad. It isn't evil, but how do you communicate it with somebody? And at what age? Maybe at what age did you realize, okay, this is different than maybe my friends? And maybe that didn't happen. I don't know, but it's an interesting thing because we have so many clients that are millionaires and they're net worth millionaires. They're millionaires in their accounts. They're millionaires, multi-millionaires, and you would never know it. And it's always a question of how do you explain that to your children, and at what time is that appropriate to do? They can even understand it.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I think it is so age appropriate and so dependent upon, I think, the maturity of the child too. So for us growing up as Ramseys, I mean, honestly, I had no clue. I mean, genuinely thought, majority of my friends were wealthier than us and just like what they bought and wore. And we just didn't get, I mean, we may get a nice Christmas gift, but mom and dad were not flashy. And then when I went to college, they built a new home. I'll never forget this. I was a sophomore and dad showed me the plans of this home, and it was a large home. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I said, Dad, how much is the mortgage on this thing? I literally asked that to him because I'm like, there's no way you can pay cash for this home. And he looked at me, he's like, Rachel, I'm not taking out a mortgage. I'm paying cash for this. We don't do debt in this family. And I was like, wait, I mean, my mind at, 19, 20 years old was that was one of my first moments where I thought, oh, what? And then about 2 years later is where they kind of opened up the books for us as kids and showed my
Okay.
siblings and I everything. So, I mean, we were 21, 22 when they
Okay.
did all of that. So
So
that was a little bit later.
okay.
Or I guess you would say later. I don't know if that's later or not, but that was my story and how they did that. And honestly, I think that was one thing they got so right. And what I want to model for my kids is even if we have the money, we don't need it all.
Yeah.
You don't need it all because it's back to that contentment conversation we were having. And even my daughter, I mean, she was in the 3rd grade and there were girls in her class, which again, this is not a right or wrong moral statement, but they had Stanley Cups.
Yeah.
They had, Lululemon stuff. I mean, in the 3rd grade. And I was like, okay. And again, it's not this judgment on the parents by any means, but I told Amelia, and we had a conversation about it because she wanted a fanny pack from Lululemon. And I said, babe, listen, I just need you to realize that these kind of things that you're talking about, these are things that moms buy, that 30, 40, 50-year-old women buy. In our house, it's not going to be the 8, 9, and 10-year-old little girl. And so you're going to have to realize that there's going to be things that people have that mom and dad are just not going to buy.
Yeah.
And again, there's going to be other things that we go and have a great experience at Disney World or at the beach, or we're going to do some fun things as a family, but it's not going to be this, hey, I want this because so and so has it, and that mom and dad are just going to go and buy it. That's not going to happen. So I just need to set that expectation now. She was like, okay, that's fine. And she's so sweet. But I can't, and even though we could, right? I mean, like totally can.
Yeah.
But for me, I'm like, I want her to feel a need in life.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that's a healthy hunger.
Yeah.
And how I can keep that going, I think is great.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. It is interesting to see that. And you're like, oh my goodness, there's kids that have nicer clothes than I do. What's going on
Right.
here?
I know. Yeah. And again, and I think the motivation behind it is really key, right? And that's probably what I would tell, someone listening. We're like, oh my gosh, Rachel, my daughter has, Lululemon pants.
Yeah.
And again, I think it's so much of the motivation, it's so much of the heart and the why. Why am I doing this? And I always ask myself, if nobody sees this purchase, do I still want it?
Yeah.
And, for her, if nobody saw that Lululemon fanny pack, would she still want it? Probably not. Right.
That's
So
right.
like there's a motivation and a heart that's really important through this too.
Discussions in this show are for entertainment and educational purposes only and should not be construed as specific recommendations or investment advice. Always consult with your investment professional before making important investment decisions. Securities offered through registered representatives of Cambridge Investment Research Incorporated, a broker-dealer, member FINRA SIPC. Advisory services through Cambridge Investment Research Advisors Incorporated, a registered investment advisor. Cambridge and SmartPro Financial are not affiliated.
So going into now, you're part of Ramsey Solutions. So this is a big company. I was at Entre Leadership this year, and Dave and Daniel spoke about working together in business and what they've learned. What have you learned, in your role? Like, you're a Ramsey personality, you're out there. Like, what have you learned in your role of working in this family business?
Yeah, so I wear kind of 2 hats at the company. I'm much more personality. It's probably the hat I wear the most. And then I am on the operating board and a third of, or I guess a fourth of the owner. And so kind of balancing those 2 hats is interesting. As a personality, it is different because I am in the same industry as my dad. I am, I think I've been very aware and, very self-aware that this all was built and I had the pleasure of stepping on a platform. And I still, was not given everything at work. I started my video blog back in, probably 10 years ago with a flip camera and a tripod in a closet in our office, and had to grow my audience from there. And then when I did that, then we could step up and step up. So like that from speaking, I mean, I was speaking for free for so long just to get on stages and to get my name out there. So there was a level of grind in it, but yet I stepped into this machine and that self-awareness that, I didn't do this all from the ground up, right? And so I think that's been important for me. And I think people that step into a role, whether you're starting something from scratch, there is somebody's shoulders that you're standing on. And whether that was the encouragement from parents or a mentor or something, like we all have these pieces of our lives. They're going to look different that people have poured into us as people to get us to where we are. And I think that there's a humility there to say, gosh, God, thank you. Like it's such a gift of the life he's created and where you are, just to be grateful for the people that have brought you along, I think is really key. And so there's been that. I think, a few years in, I was, 22, 23, 24 doing this, and I was using his jokes and I was kind of parroting a lot of what he was doing. I was just kind of figuring out my voice. And I think for me, finding I'm Rachel. I'm not a joke, but I'm not a balding 60-year-old man. That's not who I am. And so who can I be? And I learned that pretty early on, which I'm thankful for. And that's been beautiful. And that's what I would tell people, to step into who you are. Even if you're, using, the same template as somebody else, you do it so uniquely because of how you were created. So step into that. It's a really beautiful thing, and you can reach people differently than other people can. And so I've kind of learned those kind of things throughout it. But from the family business aspect, which is more on that other side, where I'm with my brother as part of the company. My dad, obviously, my sister runs our family foundation, but she comes to the board meetings as well. She's a board member too. So yeah, there's definitely that family dynamic. And I think as dysfunctional as a family is as dysfunctional as the family business will be. And so for the Ramseys, we have a lot of dysfunction, but we also have a lot of function. So there's and we see that there's a mirror. I'm oh my gosh, the things that we're not great at as a family are mirrored when it comes to business problems.
Yeah.
But the things that we are so good at, and the way we love each other and are connected and close, and all of that is portrayed in a beautiful way in the family business, where we trust each other immensely. And we and I would say this forever, ever, amen. And among the siblings, we have so much respect for each other. My brother stepped into the president role about 12 months ago, and my sister and I are literally probably the biggest cheerleaders for him, because we know how amazing he is. He's really smart. He's really humble. He's hungry. I mean, he has done such a great job over 8-9 years building in who he is in this company. So again, that's the beautiful part. But then the parts where we can butt heads or disagree, or the way we do conflict, and it's not always, respectful and all of that, that comes out at the family dinner at Christmas, and it also can come out in the board meeting too. So you kind of have to, realize that. But it's a really beautiful thing.
It's a skill to learn that. It's tough.
Yeah.
It's
For sure.
It's funny you mentioned your brother Daniel. So I was at EntreLeadership, and I had a terrible sinus infection. I fly from Florida to Texas, and I had that thing happen where you can't hear. Landed, and it was your ears just was you couldn't hear anything. And he doesn't know this, but I saw him right when he got off the elevator, and we had met before. And so he said, "Hey, how are you doing?" And I yelled at him, because it's how you have earbuds in, you don't know how loud you're talking.
Yes.
And I was just yelled. And then I immediately got on, and I was like, what just happened? What just happened? And so hopefully he doesn't remember that, but if he ever hears this, he'll be like, "Oh, that's
so
why he yelled at
funny.
me." All right,
So
got
funny.
it.
So good.
How about communication? Because a lot of small businesses, a lot of family businesses, communication can be so difficult, and the fact that you're communicating as you would outside of the walls of the business, right? Communicating as a father and son would, a daughter and mother, and that can be rough, because if you may talk in a way that somebody else that is an employee would never talk, or vice versa. And I've seen that in meetings with businesses, and you're like, man, if you get you should be fired if you were somebody else. And you also just are abusive, and how you just tore that person up. And totally. You see that and that can be so uncomfortable for people that work there, and it changes the dynamic and respect level. How did you guys learn the communication? Is it just day one, hey, this is how we're going to do it? Or did you have to learn it through trial and error?
Yeah, I mean, I think both. I think we had an expectation going in, and it was little things too. We call him Dave at the office, not Dad.
Yeah.
So if we're in a meeting or something, it's Dave. And it's small things like that where you try not to tilt the room as much. But really for us, in reality, the only time we're all together is in those board meetings. And it's with probably 10 other board members who have been a part of the board for 6+ years.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of trust in that group. So when there is kind of the punches are flying, and as Ramsey kids, we probably say things, to your point, that other people would say, hopefully the same thing, but differently, but we just get right to it. Right. So, there's a lot of respect and trust among that group. I don't think we would be as flippant in other situations, if we were somewhere else. But that core group in the operating board, I'm really thankful for, because we are able to kind of just lay it out there and go there. But I do, yeah. I mean, I think about it a lot when it comes to, if Dave and I do the show together, it's a fun banter. It's a fun dynamic that not everybody has. So I do play into that because it's fun, that I can kind of poke at him in ways that others can't. But again, that there's a natural respect that we all have, regardless of the situation or the conflict. And I think at the end of the day, we all know, especially from the business aspect, that we want this business to thrive. We want it to do well. So when we're fighting for it, we're fighting for the good of the business. And we may be looking at it in different ways or have different ideas of how to do that, but we're all fighting for that same goal. And there's something in that I think is really beautiful. And as my siblings have gotten older and we all have kids around the same age, we've gotten closer. And we've even said, just even as siblings, like, and Dad has told us when he's gone, don't keep this thing alive if it's just struggling, and don't feel like, oh my gosh, I'm failing my dad because this thing didn't, sustain, even though we wanted to. But we've all said, if this all goes away, like, we're okay. Like, we are a family that loves each other. And I think those are important roots to have, because, man, and you see this all the time, I'm sure, it can tear people apart. It can tear relationships apart. And so that's something that I think we have a healthy level of fear of, that we don't want. We don't want. And at the end of the day, we want to help people with their money and get out of debt. It's a calling on our lives.
Yeah.
But we don't want to ruin relationships in the process in order to do it.
That's right. And I want to give some of the listeners a little perspective, because this threw me off the first time I ever went to Ramsey Solutions. It's in 2012. I had just become a SmartVestor, and I lived in Atlanta at the time. And so I drove over to Nashville, and my expectation was it was going to be just the radio show and kind of a small setup. And at that time, you guys had around 400, I think it was about 400 employees. And there was the building behind the first building. Went in there and the setup, and how you guys treated us was fantastic. But we're in there, it's like, whoa, this is an operation. Like, it was way more than my expectations were, right? Like, what I thought didn't meet. And then, of course, you've built the new headquarters now, which did the same thing. First time I visited, I think, was in 2020. And seeing that operation and what you guys have built, your small business is over 1,000 employees and personalities and public figures. Like, that's got to come with its own set of challenges just in general. What would you say for somebody that's growing and scaling a business, maybe not obviously at that size, but growing a business? What has been things along the way that you guys have looked at each other, whether that's operations board, whether that's you and the family at dinners, and just go, man, this is a learning experience to grow something that big?
It's interesting because I think the biggest, or I'll say for me, my brother may have a different opinion on this. I think some of the biggest weight you carry are the team members, are the people, because you want to treat the people you work with, to a degree, like family. You treat the amount of effort and work and responsibility you have to people was a bigger weight for me. And whether somebody, and again, with 1,200 people, there's things that tragic things that happen in their personal lives that you want to be a part of. But then also when something happens and you got to let someone, it's exhausting and it's hard and it's not fun. And so I think the people aspect was a much more of a blessing and a drain than I probably expected, right? You kind of just think, oh yeah, people just come in and do their job and you leave. And then you realize, no, they're people, and we want to obviously treat them like people. And so for me, that's probably been one of the biggest, is growing a healthy team of people that work there, that believe in what you're doing. They're not just collecting a paycheck. And Ramsey, we're a little bit rigid. You have to be here in the office. So that means you have to live in Nashville to do it. And, there's some parameters there. And you want to get the right people in the right seats and have the right people here. So I think for me, that's been one of the biggest blessings of this place, and the biggest weight that you carry. So that's what I would tell small business owners, is the people you hire matter, because the culture and the health of the team, I think it makes it really fun to come to work, or you dread it because the people you work with, right? You want to enjoy it. So for me, it's the people side. My brother's way more into the numbers and all the P&Ls and all of that. So he may have a different answer for you, but that would be mine.
So two kind of wild card topics real quick. So two things that you talk about a lot on Smart Money Happy Hour on your podcast: conspiracy theories. All right.
Oh, yeah.
So We're doing a meeting in Denver, so you can't talk about Denver without talking
Oh,
about the airport,
oh
right?
yeah,
So
walk through that
like,
airport. Yeah, walk through
um,
that airport. Just know.
I know all, I'm here for all the conspiracy theories, but my question directly is, have you ever let a conspiracy theory affect your habits or views on money?
It's a great question. I would say at the end of the day, no. I still have been doing what I've been doing with money even 10 years ago. I
Mhm.
mean, I'm still, whether it's investing, budgeting, those kind of big principles, no, that giving, those have not changed. Yeah. So I've stayed very consistent. Um, I, yeah, there was a season that I was like, let's buy more of batteries and bottles of water back
Sure.
in 2020, where I thought, oh, so purchasing wise, I'm not like a major prepper, but
Yeah.
there's been some purchases that were like, oh yeah, we'll do that. We'll throw that out there. Some expenses, if you will, but no, not from a high level. I did not like pull out of the market thinking the market was going to crash. I didn't think, the housing bubble was being controlled by China, so we didn't buy a house. Like nothing like that.
Yeah.
The conspiracy theories for me, I would say they're probably like 60% entertaining,
Yeah.
40% thinking, okay, this could all go down. And
Uh,
if it does, what's gonna
yeah.
happen?
But you don't let it derail your money goals.
I don't let it derail my money goals. No, no. And I know people that like cashed out their 401k and went
Sure.
crypto because they thought, that the market was going to crash, or I mean, it was terrible. So I think
Yeah.
and the problem with that, and again, I have fun and joke with conspiracy theories, and I love to read them or talk about them with friends. Like it's fun, but it is very fear-based. I mean, you're
Sure.
thinking like, okay, how is Apple controlling this? And are they, in
Yeah.
cahoots with China? You can go through all these like rabbit holes. But at the end of the day, a lot of it's fueled by a lot of fear about what's the unknown, and can I control the unknown? And I try not to make money decisions based on fear.
Yeah.
There was a great quote, and I can't remember who said it, but they said, "Don't make money decisions when you're scared or drunk."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Those are good. Those are good,
That's good
good
advice.
philosophies."
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Let's save people a lot
Uh,
of money.
yeah, that's right. That's right. So no, I have not made money decisions. I try to make those on data and
Yeah.
what I see, not what I'm feeling and experiencing in my conspiracy theory world.
Yeah. No, it's an interesting, the reason I bring it up is because in our world in finance, with investments, a lot of times things kind of weave into that, whether it's gold or the US dollar, what's going to happen, if this country doesn't use the dollar, and then is, China overtaking. And so there's always this level of like, I guess. And then, so it's very difficult because it's not like yes and no. It's like,
Totally.
that probably might be happening. I don't know,
So
but
funny. Yes, yes.
also I
And
don't know what to do about it.
right, that's right. That's right. Yeah. At the end of the day, if that all happens, that's kind of what I think. We're all looking for something different than,
That's
yeah,
right.
than gold, even at that point.
Yeah.
So yeah, and in the financial space, I think a lot of people jump on that vulnerability of people that kind of get fearful and get in a spiral. And there's a lot of greed in it for people that,
Sure.
whether it's the gold or whatever it may be, that I think I have a lot of red flags about too. So that's probably one reason I haven't derailed any money
Yeah.
decisions, is because I know on the other side there's somebody else trying to profit probably from like a level of fear, and I don't like that either.
Yeah. It is interesting is that, for us, we see a lot of that movement when there's a down market, and the first real prolonged down market was 2022. And all of a sudden you're like, hey, you're a Ramsey fan. Why are you wanting to put all your money in a whole life insurance policy? Or why are you wanting to put all your money in a, fixed annuity? But it comes out of fear because
It
people
is, yeah,
are chirping, they're talking to them. And all of a sudden you're like, you know what? That foundational thing that I was grounded in, maybe I moved away from it. Maybe I've been plugged into that environment of giving me positive information, and that fear takes over, and you can
for
make
sure.
decisions that aren't good.
Yep, absolutely.
So the other off topic, Disney. All right. So,
Yes.
there's some people that just tuned out like, oh, dorks, but I get it. Okay. You love Disney. I love Disney. I have an annual pass to Disney. So when you talk about it, I'm like, you know what? All right. I'm with her on this. I get it. My question is, does he go to Disney with you guys?
No, he doesn't. You know what Dave did though, and we're very grateful for this. He took us on a Disney cruise
Okay.
back probably 6 years ago, before COVID and all of
Yeah.
that. And my sister and I talked him into it because we had little kids at the time, and we were like, take us, we were like, let's all go as a big family.
That's
So he
right.
did that, and he wore a Mickey Mouse shirt. So we will give him all the kudos. But I think that may have been the last Disney experience Dave will do.
Oh no. You know, it's so funny about that because that's so on brand. Like that's what I wanted you to say. I
Yes,
didn't want
that's
you to be
right.
like, you know what? He loves Pirates of the Caribbean. And I was like, no, because it can't be another way. Like
That's right.
one of my business partners and best friends growing up is the same way. He's like, I don't get it. And I'm like, man, we both watched Lion King at the same time, man, when we were in
I
fifth grade.
know.
What are you talking about? How do you not love this? Like what? This
So
doesn't do
funny.
anything for you? And he's, no, I don't know. I don't, and
My husband, Winston, I have to he told me the other day, he was like, because we're planning one, our son hasn't been yet, and he'll be 5 in October. So for fall break, I was like, babe, let's do a trip to Disney so Charles can go and experience Disney World. And he's like, I just need to know, what's your baseline of how many times a year, that our family in some capacity is going to interact with Disney World? I was like, I don't know. He's like, I just need to be emotionally prepared because he doesn't get it either. I mean, and we're going in the fall. And so we've booked some of the stuff. And I mean, he's like, the amount of money that we could spend
Oh yeah.
and go somewhere. And I'm like, but it's just not the same. It is. Yeah. It's so magical to me. I think it's so fun. I love it, but I love chaos and the craziness of life where he likes more structure. And so, yeah, there's just a level you dive in and you go and it's great.
That's right. And I don't know if you've seen this statistic. It came out recently in the last maybe week or so, but it talked about, you talk about the expense of Disney. It said, did you see this 45% of families go into debt for a Disney vacation?
I know. And one thing they've done, I guess you could say it's brilliant marketing, but I think they've convinced the country or most of the country that it's like a childhood, rite of passage. So you have to go to Disney. And that's what's so hard is that families, it's so expensive and families feel like they're failing to a degree. Oh my gosh, if we can't afford this. So then they go financially in a hole to do it. And it's not worth right. At the end of the day, your experience with your kids, whether it's at a park down the street or you're going to the beach or whatever it is, fill in the blank, being with them is what's important. And the hard thing is that I do think we've set this expectation that it's expected or that you should be going and all of that. And that's hard. That is hard for families right now.
So Rachel, as we come to a close here, at SmartPro, we help people get to that baby step 7. We have our custom investments that reflect exactly what the Ramsey solutions say about investing for the long term. So beyond the, those two things, walking people through the baby steps and making sure their investments are set up the correct way for the long term and buy and hold and keep them and don't get off the roller coaster. Of all your experience, is there anything that you go, you know what, this is something that almost every success story we've seen has that you can share with us?
I would say, I think it's personal ownership. And I think we talk to people that are making, 60 grand a year and they've paid off debt, or you're talking to, net worth millionaires who are growing a legacy for their family and see it, as this, as a stewardship mindset, whatever it is, on any end of the spectrum, people that have won with money have taken upon themselves to do it, that they're not waiting on someone to do it for them. And there's something in that I think is so powerful. That really does, it changes the mindset, but then it also is the mirror that when mistakes are made, it's on me too, right? So there's that personal accountability and personal responsibility that every person that has done something financially really wise has been proactive and they've been the one to do it and they're not waiting around. So I would say it's that.
That's great. So how do people follow you? How do we get more of Rachel Cruze?
Yes. So I'm on all the socials at Rachel Cruze. You can check me out there. And then a couple of podcasts of the Ramsey Show I co-host, Smart Money Happy Hour I co-host as well, and then I have the Rachel Cruze Show. So those are all on podcast and YouTube.
Great. Rachel Cruze, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, thank you so much for joining us here on SmartPro Radio. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, go to our website at smartprofinancial.com. And under the News and Research tab, you'll be able to find more episodes just like this one. And make sure not to miss out on November 4th, where I host Matt Arroyo, social media influencer, jiu-jitsu gym owner, and former UFC fighter. We'll see you then.